Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan, and we're live streaming on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. And my folks are asking me to please do more than just my weekly podcast interview and answer people's questions and address the existential crisis so many people feel like we're in. And for this live stream, I'd like to start with a short clip of Donald Trump.
Job. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. His pretty colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. "Poor thing," she cried, "I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you." The border. She stroked his pretty skin, and then she kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite.
Take me in, oh tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake.
So I'm not sure if we're going to hear...
and what my father stands for are in such opposition. The snake was basically written to outline something like what he's doing. It's actually amazing to me because I know that he would have said, well, it's about him.
Right. So I thought it would be very apropos to start out with Donald Trump's favorite story, the snake. And as someone who's researched Donald Trump for years, I think that it's a very important story that we should all keep thinking about in the days and weeks and months ahead, because Donald Trump is basically saying, you knew I was a vicious snake, but you supported me and helped me, so why are you surprised that I bite you and kill you? So what I want to, state categorically again, as I did in my book, The Cult of Trump, is that Trump is a malignant narcissist, and he was taught that people are predators and prey, and unless you're going to eat whoever you're dealing with, they're going to eat you. That's his mindset. And it's a dictator's mindset. And he said he wants to be a dictator. He said that we won't need to have another election once he's in power. And he has been duly elected. And so there are many, many people, some maybe half of the Americans who voted, certainly not half of America, but half of Americans who voted are happy that he's in power. But let's wait and we'll see if he does declare martial law and starts to spend, hundreds of billions of dollars to do a mass deportation or use the military to start deporting our neighbors and our friends and our family, how people will feel. If tariffs are put on foreign goods and everything costs a lot more. We'll find out if people are happy with that. Or as he wants to dismantle public education or dismantle Social Security benefits or Medicare, how the average working person is going to respond. I predict people are going to realize the lesson that their minds were manipulated, as I wrote in my book about mind control, through the media, through social media marketing, algorithms, AI, Russia, Iran, Christian nationalists, and on and on. So I wanted to convey to everybody what I had said in my first live stream, that when we are faced with such danger, we tend to want to fight or flight or freeze or fawn. Those are the four primary reactions people have. And I stated categorically, I'm here for the fight. I am certainly not going to run away. I don't feel like any other country is safer than being in Massachusetts, where I am. And I do think that having a gay governor is going to help. And I do think that some of the blue states are going to be more respectful for women's rights and gay rights and indigenous rights, etc. And I certainly am not going to fawn, which is what a lot of people did and do when they're faced with threats from an authoritarian or totalitarian dictatorship. They just smile and say, whatever you want, master. I'll do whatever you tell me. Not an option. And why am I hopeful? Because my experience, having been in a mind control cult, is that people want to be free. They don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be exploited and used. And that fundamentally, we need to rebuild human connections with family, with friends, with community. And we need to stop looking at our tech as godly, etc. I did an incredible interview with the MIT humanist chaplain Greg Epstein on his fine book, Tech Agnostic, about how the tech billionaires do world religion, which is big tech, and promoting crazy ideas like transhumanism and long-termism. It's a really important interview and a really important book that I want to call people's attention to. So I want to start interacting with my audience. Jay says it angers me so much that I was once into QAnon. Feels like people like me are the reason for all of this. Even after over half a decade out, I still feel such guilt. Jay, my man, thank you for speaking out. I've talked with 2 people preparing books right now who have come out of the QAnon rabbit hole. And the key thing is realizing we're human beings. Our minds can get hacked. We can fall for the lies of someone with certainty. And we have the right to say, oops, I made a mistake. I trusted the wrong people. I turned my back on my value system, my family, my religion, my country, and now I'm back again. And I'm telling you, former members are the answer. I hate to make it sound too elevating, but people who've lost their freedom or people who've come out of dictatorships and come to the United States because they want human rights, this is the core of the freedom of mind community. People who can say, I'm educated, I'm intelligent, my mind got hacked, I left, and life is good. I'm so glad that I am free. And for those who are new to me, And my story, I was recruited into the Moonies in 1974 at college, at Queens College, dropped out, became a right-wing extremist fascist, believing democracy was satanic and that God wanted a theocracy and that we would amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who didn't follow Moon's dictates. And I thought it was a great idea at the time until I fell asleep at the wheel of a van and experienced the deprogramming, where I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing. And that started to turn my lights back on of, wait a minute, we think we're God, Chinese communism is Satan, but we're doing the same 8 criteria that Robert J. Lifton wrote in his 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. So I want to thank JC, who just messaged, I've added a membership to Steve's Substack. Thank you, because honestly, I've been funding all of my efforts from my consultation fees over the years, and I really want to get my message and do more training and write more books out. And getting subscriptions is what I feel is more resonant with my values, as opposed to doing soap advertisements or hair shampoo advertisements. I'd like people to value what I'm teaching and to want to help me get the message out. And PMFG thanks me for the live stream and says they benefited from my work for years. Thank you. I am hearing from people I've helped over the decades, and it's now 48 years since I exited. And I'm getting photos of me with the person I helped from 45 years ago, which is I have to laugh. It's really great. Disciples in Recovery messaged our ministries about preaching truth. We appreciate your work and service, Dr. Hassan. How do we receive training for supporting the community, the church members regarding indoctrination? The easy thing right now is email center@freedomofmind.com. I do have courses. And thank you, Disciples in Recovery, because you reminded me of an important point that I meant to say when we showed the snake story video. And I want to preface what I'm about to say, by saying I'm Jewish. I'm not a Christian. But if you're Christian, and I've worked with many, many people in Christian cults over the decades, with people who've been seminary trained preachers and really educated, dedicated Christians. They tell me Jesus said, beware false prophets, beware the Antichrist, that even the elect are going to be deceived. And what is the metaphor for Satan in the New Testament? I think it's the snake. Duh. Isn't that true for those of you who are Christian? And I want to add that I interviewed Amanda Tyler, who wrote a book called How to End Christian Nationalism. She's a Baptist. She's a woman of faith. But she really believes that it's incredibly important to not have Christian nationalism in our government, imposing a religious test. It's exactly the opposite of what the founders wanted. JC is messaging, what would you recommend we post and share to help others if we are still engaged on social media? Is there a Freedom of Mind clips library? I honestly think that's a great idea to have a clips library, and a bunch of my folks are going to be reading and listening to this. And the key thing that I want to say is that when we're dealing with information warfare space, there are do's and don'ts. And what you don't want to do is what the media does all the time, which is give amplification to disinformation by saying, see what a crazy thing Trump is saying now, but they're saying disinformation. Don't amplify lies ever. If you want, you can say, Trump said something today, here's the facts about that topic. And you say the facts. And I also want to talk about, mention PolitiFact, which is a really good fact-checking resource. TrueMedia.org is a new nonprofit that's 90% effective at determining if something is a deep fake video. And think about before you share anything or like something. Do you know who the person was or is? Have you verified the information yourself? Has it come from a legitimate source? And you can pause and understand a lot of what's happening in social media is going after the lower part of our brain stem, our emotional self. And we want to be operating in our critical thinking adult minds, where we're using social media, it's not using us. So if we set in our mind, I'm going to go on social media for 15 minutes, set a timer. And when the timer goes off, get off social media. That will stop what's called doom scrolling, where people go into a hypnotic trance and disappear for 2 hours and then don't get the sleep they need. Black Moon Taylor, former cult member here. I am now a therapist and I'm currently training to be a cult recovery therapist, currently taking Dr. Hassan's clinical course. Thanks, my man. I have to admit, I am biased. I think former members who then become mental health professionals have an insight into helping people who've been unduly influenced. That said, you need to do your own recovery work, and it's more than just reading books. It's really processing through how your mind got hacked. And there are differences with people born in cults, like the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses, just to pick two multi-million person cults that many people don't realize are authoritarian, bite model mind control cults. Or people like myself, where I had a normal childhood and got recruited at age 19 and came out at 22 and had a self to go back to. And to be reminded of my values and my beliefs and what was important to me. So, and please get supervision also if you're a new therapist, because there's so much to learn. I do intend to do some type of supervision on Zoom with people who've finished my courses. So please make sure to message us. And for those who've taken the courses, I think we've offered an affiliate status so that if you put it on your website or on your social media and other people take it, I think you get 10% or some kickback, some type of incentive that my marketing people said would be really smart. Francois Degrone said, couple of in-laws, hardcore tea cult. I love from safe arm's length and no waste my breath over logic, facts, morality, and kindness. So it sounds like you may be French. And what I want to say in response to that comment is that you really need to not allow yourself to be abused by interacting with people who are in an authoritarian mind control mindset, whether on the left or the right. You want to be able to pick and choose how much time and energy you want to learn self-regulation techniques so you don't get triggered. And let me take a minute to just talk about triggers, because it's a major piece of cult mind control recovery. So a trigger is a cue. It can be any of the five senses or combinations of that. And when I first got out of the Moonies, and my friend Lenny said, "Did you see the moon last night?" And the word moon, I was back kneeling on my knees on a concrete floor in front of the fat Korean billionaire. And I was like, what? I didn't want to have that triggered reaction. I had to say to myself, how did I used to respond when I heard the word moon? I thought of the satellite that goes around the Earth, and I deliberately repaired or reassociated the word moon with the reaction I wanted to have. So what we're doing here is we're rewiring our brains. We're using neurogenesis and neuroplasticity to rewire our brain, as opposed to what 95% of everybody does with a negative trigger is they avoid the stimulus. So if they came out of a Bible cult, they won't even go near a Bible. Or if they came out of a yoga cult or a meditation cult, they won't go near yoga or meditation. No, it's your mind, it's your body. You should be in control. That's the whole theme of my work. PMFG, is it helpful to learn and develop skills for de-escalation and neutral rhetoric to avoid causing an aggressive response from radicalized people? Absolutely. Does it help to identify trigger words? Absolutely. So I'm actually working on a book project and an audio and course project to actually demonstrate interacting with people who ideally will be former members who will be role-playing, because it's a form of another way to learn how to do this. But let me state categorically, what doesn't work ever is attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policy directly. That activates the cult identity, that gets defensive and feels like you're persecuting them, and they'll get loud, they'll attack back. That doesn't work. What works is a relational, hey, you're my uncle, you're my sister, you're my brother, I miss you, I want you in my life. Can we have a redo? Can we figure out how we can be in each other's lives and bring out the best in each other and get out of this black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil, us versus them frame? Carrie Toomey says, I'm wondering, though, if you're able to offer any advice or what equipment is required, how to manage pain manipulation, which initiated with repetition and aft. Not sure what you're asking about there. Sorry about that. Write the question more clearly and I'll try to come back to it. Jay says, the most effective method to help will involve not mentioning the cult leader when discussing how we fell into the cult, correct? Yes, categorically, what I can tell you works best with MAGA folks is talking about Chinese communist brainwashing or pimps and traffickers, and learning my influence continuum and bite model of authoritarian control, and talking about how people are made to be dependent and obedient. They're given new identities. They have to suppress their own thoughts and feelings and behaviors and go through the bite model list, because their cult identity is not going to be reactive if you're talking about something that they agree with is a bad group or a bad mind control situation. And it's very interesting because ex-QAnon folks in particular were really pumped up about they're going to save children from trafficking. And when they learn that I'm an expert in trafficking, in fact, they did my doctoral dissertation on how to use trafficking law, which is fraud, force, or coercion, to update the law regarding undue influence. And in fact, labor trafficking experts and sex trafficking experts love to use my influence continuum and bite model, because it gets granular. sleep control, clothing control, changing names. You can just go through the entire list. And I do want to just do a promo for something that we're going to be releasing shortly. It's a shortened version of my doctoral dissertation survey of just 40 questions that you can tick off never to always of behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control. And it will actually give you a number on the influence continuum of authoritarianism that a relationship may be, or your company may be, or a country may be. James Hoyt Bishop II, what percentage of followers are damaged beyond repair, like the cult leader? I don't think there's any good statistics in the world of cults. I get asked how many cults are in the United States or how many cults are in the world. I have no clue. I can tell you tens of thousands, because somebody's in one cult, they get out, they don't get counseled, they may start another cult or enter another cult, and things morph and mutate, just like a mind control virus. I should say, just like a virus mutates over time, mind control viruses do the same. Did I watch the Stanford Prison Experiment on Hulu? If so, what's your critique? So Dr. Philip Zimbardo is a mentor of mine. I've done interviews with him. I have a long interview with him. I think I did in 1993, and where I sat with him at his house in San Francisco and asked him to define mind control. Dr. Zimbardo did a course at Stanford for 15 years called The Psychology of Mind Control, and in fact used 2 chapters from Combating Cult Mind Control. There's an official Stanford Prison Experiment film that's been done, and I've heard there's a new one. Perhaps it's on Hulu. I'm not sure where it is, or if it's on National Geographic. I intend to watch it, but it's attacking Dr. Zimbardo. And when the attack initially happened a few years ago, I actually did a video and a blog. So I encourage people to check that out. As soon as I watch this new thing, I'm going to message my thoughts about it. But I can tell you that in my work, I reference 3 social psychology experiments almost universally. The Asch Conformity Study, Solomon Asch, ASCH, the Milgram Obedience Study, and the Zimbardo Prison Study. And I'm going to save an explanation of those 3 for another time, but they're very important. Kay Clark said, Dr. Hassan, how can we deal with the knowledge that half of the voters in our country believe that cruelty is okay and they asked for it? I don't understand. So what my opinion is that if you ask people who voted for MAGA, are they for cruelty? They'll say no. If you ask them, are you for supporting a pathological liar? They'll say, of course not. Because when people are thinking and making choices, they have a story in their mind, sometimes from unethical influence, often painting the other side as demons, satanic, traffickers, etc. So it's in their mind, it's a lesser of 2 evils choice, rather than I like, rapists and people who steal secrets and give it to our foreign adversaries. I think most Americans, if they understood clearly the facts, would say nope. So I really do believe people are going to be realizing, as I realized, Moon was a liar, and if he's a liar, he couldn't be a man of God, and therefore is not trustworthy, and therefore is not worth my time and my energy to support in any way, shape, or form. Hex is saying, so no attacking the doctrine directly. What's the difference between that and ex-members who read material such as CES letter for ex-Mormons and their shelf breaks? Is this because they are reading? I've done a lot of work with former Mormons. In fact, John Dehlin, who's a former sixth-generation Mormon, and a psychologist who was excommunicated for him speaking out for gay rights, has a podcast called Mormon Stories Podcast. And when I went out last year, he sat me down for two 3.5-hour interviews. So if you want to hear everything about my childhood and my upbringing and how I got into the Moonies, etc., go there. We also have an 8-hour course that John and I did when I was in Utah for 150 former Mormons, where they were asking questions and we were both responding. Everybody has their own path to recovery. For me, I was a book reader before the Moonies. I loved to read and learn and understand stuff. So for me, when I got out of the Moonies, I wanted to read books about brainwashing and mind control and persuasion and attitude change. I wanted to talk to Robert Lifton, who met with me, and Margaret Singer, who wrote the foreword to Combating, and Lewis West, and others. And I needed to talk to rabbis and Christian theologians to deconstruct the divine principle, which is the Moonies' dogma and doctrine that I was teaching as a cult leader. I needed to deconstruct intellectually what was real, what was true, what was stolen, in order to formulate, okay, what do I believe now? And figuring out what do I believe now is part of the work. Louisa said, why is the cult phenomenon not widely studied in academia? Great question. What I would like to say is that as Big Tobacco hired, quote, experts to say there's no link between smoking and cancer, even though they knew that it caused lung cancer and death, cults have hired sociologists of religion and invested a lot of money to empower them to write articles saying there's no such thing as brainwashing or mind control. In fact, we shouldn't use the word cults. We should call them new religious movements. And as I was doing my literature review for my doctoral work, I saw so many articles by these apologists. It was flooding academia. And part of what needs to happen is we need to have more scholars studying authoritarian mind control cults and connecting the dots with my BITE model of authoritarian control, for example. And if you're part of a community of ex-members of a group, whether it's Falun Gong or TM or Scientology, I would love for hundreds, if not thousands, of former members to fill out my BITE model in terms of their own direct experience. And then we can create a database, and then we can write journal articles about each one of these groups and ideally give specific examples of the mind control used in the cult. Karen Louise, I personally feel we don't acknowledge how common cults are because educated, intelligent, successful people don't want to admit that they too can be hacked. So true. And let me tell you, people walk around with what is known in social psychology as the fundamental attribution error. I know those are three big words, fundamental attribution error. What that means is that we have a cognitive bias when we look to try to understand other human behavior. we overestimate what's called dispositional variables or personality variables and underestimate the social influence context variables. So why did Steve get in the Moonies? Steve was stupid. He was weak. He needed a father figure. He didn't have a good religious education. As opposed to Steve's girlfriend dumped him. 3 women flirted with him and lied to him and got him to go to an isolated place where he was sleep deprived and hypnotized. You get the gist? So if you ask, this is a good experiment. Go around and ask everybody in your life, do you think that intelligent, educated people can be mind controlled into a destructive cult or not? That's the first question. And then the second question is, do you think you might be deceived and mind controlled given the right set of circumstances? Because my advocacy is to tell everybody, put your ego aside, get humble, realize we're human, and therefore our minds can get hacked. Because once you have that humility, then you can be on guard for somebody to start manipulating you and putting ideas in your head. Another question, cults tend to be led by malignant narcissists. Can they recover? And then there's a second part to that. But let me answer the question about malignant narcissists. So the term was from Eric Fromm, who came up with this thing, and I have a whole list of the criteria on my website, freedomofmind.com. It's in chapter 3 of the re-released Cult of Trump book, where I compared Jim Jones and Sun Myung Moon and Hubbard and Donald Trump. But the theory is that people who become malignant narcissists had a very, very insecure attachment in the first few years of life. They never felt love, unconditional love, didn't feel safe. Maybe they were harassed, threatened, harmed, abused. And so as they got older, they compensated by needing praise and attention and needing everyone to serve them, etc. And for most of my professional career, the dominant belief was that if you have a personality disorder like this, you can't be fixed. And one of my mentors, one of my teachers, Daniel P. Brown, did a book on attachment repair in adults with David Elliott. And he uses a hypnotherapy approach with people who've been traumatized in their childhood, and basically asks people to visualize, instead of reliving the trauma that happened, asks them to imagine the ideal mother figure and ideal father figure and what they would have wanted them to say or do instead. In other words, to rewire our synapses and our neuronal structures so that instead of walking around with a dysfunctional mother and father voice in our head, we have a healthy mother and father voice in our head. And I asked Dan, when I got the training from him, what do you think? Do you think we can use this on malignant narcissists? And his response is, yes, I think we can. The problem is these people will almost never agree to come in for therapy. So the problem is how to motivate people to realize it's in their best interest to go into therapy and change their personality. But it's fascinating. I'll also put a plug in for a course that my friend and colleague in Melbourne, Australia, Nigel Denning, and his people did with David Elliott, teaching this attachment repair protocol and making it even better than when Dan was alive. And I did an interview with Nigel. It has links to this course on my Substack. Let's go back to questions and comments. Do authoritarian cults spread faster in guest cultures or ass cultures, or do cultures that normalize relatively larger gaps between social groups and hierarchy have a greater risk? So my reaction to this question is to say that whenever there's a major economic downturn or earthquake or tsunami or some major disruption in the way society functions, people are much more vulnerable to someone saying that they're an angel from another dimension who's come to Earth to help them, etc. So whenever there's economic and political uncertainty, the ground is very fertile for all kinds of crazy, destructive cult groups to emerge. And on that theme, I want to talk about how much damage the isolation from the COVID virus period did to human relationships, because people weren't hugging each other and kissing each other and hanging out and doing social things. They were on pixels. And I think we're still recovering from that. And do I believe in vaccinations? Yes. Do I believe that RFK is our potential health person? Is that a problem? Yeah, big problem. Really big problem. So, but anyway, let's get back to some other questions. Many people get sucked into becoming Trump supporters because they belong to other movements that seem more wholesome, but whose hidden agenda is to pull them into the far right camp. Absolutely. So, Louisa, it sounds like you haven't read my book, The Cult of Trump, yet, but one of the features of my thesis is that the cult of Trump is less about Donald Trump himself, but a 50-year history of bad actors, including fossil fuel corporations like the Kochs, far-right nationalists, Nazis, and others, to dismantle America, to break down America's hegemony and status in the world. So I talk about a whole historical series of efforts and legislations to dismantle the checks and balances that are so vital to a functioning democracy. And I also talk about how there are authoritarian cults in the cult of Trump. And the biggest group of folks are New Apostolic Reformation members, and how the media has mischaracterized NAR is by calling them Christian evangelicals instead of mind control cults, where the leader says, I'm an apostle or I'm a prophet and I can speak directly to God and God talks to me and God told me that Trump won the 2020 election. So don't listen to the satanic media. And these people claim to be able to cast out demons and do faith healings, but they do BITE, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control of their followers, and basically indoctrinate them into believing that they're spiritual warriors against Satan, and indoctrinate them to believe this is the last days. So it doesn't matter what we do to protect our biosphere, our temperature climbing, climate crisis. Doesn't matter, because Jesus is going to come back and fix everything. In the meantime, the tech bros are like, screw the earth, because they're atheists. We're going to put our consciousness into android bodies and take 35,000 years and fly to Mars, and then go explore all of the galaxies out there, and the hell with human beings. To which I say, no, 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 no. And anyone listening to me who has children or grandchildren or loves kids or loves animals, it's like, no, we need to take care of our earth. We need to take care of each other. We need to build communities and not be isolated and really connect with each other and bring out the best in each other. There is a happy future ahead. We're going to have a really rocky time for the immediate future, but have hope. Know that there are intelligent, educated people who are committed to helping get us out of this mess. And if you know people who are influencers who want to invite me on their podcast, they have 1 million followers. I would love to do larger broadcasts. I'm very grateful to David Pakman, who interviewed me on the re-release of The Cult of Trump. The last I noticed, there was 1.3 million views of my 18-minute video. So thanks, Dave, for that. Is there any way to help members in a fully online cult where the only way to contact them is via social media? So I'm a pragmatist. If you don't have any other way to access people, you have to learn social media. You have to learn how to interact in a way that's going to provoke people to feel that you're on their side, that you're not an enemy, that you're not trying to persuade them with facts out of their position, but that you're warm, respectful, curious, asking questions. And as I was saying earlier, the technique that works the best is not a frontal assault, but to talk about a group they would say is a destructive mind control group. And especially if they're on, have access to documentaries or social media. For example, I just finished watching an HBO Max 4-parter on the Yogi Bhajan cult called Breath of Fire. It's the Sikh with the white turbans, not the real Sikhs from India, but this was a mind control Kundalini yoga cult. This is the cult that has Yogi T, the cult that got $1 billion security contract for Akal Security that's run by a destructive cult. Bhajan was a molester of women, a harmer of children. It's a really valuable docuseries. So you can ask someone, especially if you know they're interested in yoga or spiritual things, to watch the docuseries with you and pause it and talk about how many intelligent, educated people were victimized by this fraud. So, how did you personally overcome the backlash you received from cults that you spread awareness about? Do you ever feel afraid? Very interesting question. So, when I first got out of the Moonies, because I was a leader, I was approached by, a House subcommittee investigation into Korean CIA activities, because I was a leader and I brought out with me internal documents of how the Moonies wanted to take over the US government. But I asked them not to put me on the stand or be public. Let me just be in the shadows, because I was afraid I was going to be assassinated. And I was so worried that I was going to be assassinated that I sat in front of a camera and told everything that I knew that I thought the Moonies wouldn't want the public to know. And we made copies and put them in lawyers' safes, and issued a letter to the Moonies that if anything happened to me, all of this material would be released in massive press conferences and such. And I've made it my work to not just be against the Moonies, but to be against all anti-human rights groups. And so, and as far as being afraid, so what I want to say is that phobia indoctrination is the universal mind control technique. In chapter 10 of my book, Freedom of Mind, I have a 3-step phobia cure that I've implemented that works. And the critical thing is using your thinking to evaluate, is there actual danger or is this an irrational fear? And when it comes to me speaking out about Trump, etc., am I worried that some person may try to shoot me or harm me or anyone near me? Sure. Do I take measures to protect myself? Sure. But I've made a decision that I want to be public. And if my time comes, my time will come. And in a way, my near-fatal van crash back in April 23rd, 1976 has been a blessing in the sense that I should have died, according to the police who rescued me. It was such a bad accident. And that my life has been a gift. And so I've had a great life, and I hope I live another 20, 30 years. But I'm very happy with what I've been able to do with my friends, my family. So, and I really want to encourage people to think rationally. Don't do rash things that are going to endanger you. Get lawyers' advice about how to talk in a way that will minimize a lawsuit and such. And I've chosen to not leave the United States because the Trump administration's coming in. Okay, we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. Reed Miller says, how do we get foreign trolls and bots off of social media? Have we all seen Don Jr.'s Instagram account as an example of the problem? I've never looked at Don Jr.'s Instagram, but for sure, I know about foreign trolls and bots and X. Oh, and by the way, the opening to the stream, my people are using Twitter, which I was laughing at with the bird and everything. And what's been happening with Musk and X is so atrocious. People are leaving X by hordes. Many are going to Blue Sky, which is another app. I've been cautioned by my colleague and friend Dave Troy that a major Russian person is involved with funding Blue Sky. But I'm on it because it's more civil. And so, but a lot of people are still on X. But the bottom line is that there are going to be more and more sophisticated ways to measure who's a bot, who's a troll, etc. But people, let's go back to people in real life, not strangers that we want to have numbers of followers on, but like real people who care and meet in person and play games and play sports and go fishing and enjoy nature and exercise and do all of those kinds of things. One more quick comment before I go on to the next comment. When Donald Trump was first running for the GOP nomination in 2015, he said, I want a total Muslim ban. And in 2015, I was involved with researching ISIS recruitment online, and I blogged for the then Huffington Post. I said, Donald Trump, ISIS's greatest recruiter. You want people to join ISIS? Listen to Trump saying he wants a Muslim ban. That'll drive a lot of people to want to join the army to fight Donald Trump. So, K-Clock, do you know anything about the People of Praise, a group that includes Amy Coney Barrett as a member? Yes, I do. In fact, when Barrett was nominated for the Supreme Court, I did three blogs and interviews, including interviews with former members of People of Praise, including a former Catholic priest who is a colleague who has helped me with cult cases. Please consider supporting my Substack, and please mine the archives that are there. I have hundreds of really important interviews and topics. So please check that out. So, wow, this hour is just flying by. I think we have another 4 or 5 minutes before I wrap up. Going back to the beginning and Donald Trump saying his favorite story is the snake. When Donald Trump says things, take him seriously, especially when he says, when he was talking about the Biden doing a coup, it was him that wanted to do the coup. I talk about this technique of projection and misdirection as a mind control technique. Is there a place to submit works that may be useful in this cause from ex-QAnon folks like me? Please contact Freedom of Mind. Our main email is center, CENTER, at freedomofmind.com. I did do a bite model analysis of QAnon as a mind control cult that will be of interest for you to look at. I will also say that I was part during the COVID crisis of a virtual TEDx program that Dave Troy put on for TEDx Mid-Atlantic called Dismantling QAnon that has been taken off of YouTube months ago as hate speech. And I can tell you assuredly there is no hate in that TEDx panel, but we did out QAnon as a PSYOP, psychological warfare operation. The material in there talks about specific alternate reality gaming techniques that are used in QAnon. I have a colleague who is tracking the first tweets from QAnon, and it's all linked back to Michael Flynn and other bad actors who have demonstrated that they are not for the Constitution and separation of church and state. So I have so much information that I've done over 48 years. Please avail yourself, educate yourself, and start sharing it with your networks. That's how we're going to spread the news. It's not going to be through corporate media for sure. Tam Jules, it's harder to break the spell of Trump, especially after his reelection has reinforced these fanatics and vindication thought process with total submission to his BS. How can we break the spell? So I believe in meeting people where they are at. So if you know people who are MAGA folks, congratulate them on their win. That'll shock them. But say, tell me, are you really happy that Donald Trump and the GOP, has now a supermajority? Tell me what your hopes are for the next few months. Tell me do you have any questions or concerns about any of the policies that he's talking about or any of the choices? How do you feel about Matt Gaetz, who was having sex with escorts who are underage and taking psychedelics, being in charge of the Department of Justice? And remind people the Department of Justice is not supposed to serve the White House. It's supposed to be an independent branch of government. Ask questions, but not in a cynical way or an attacking way. Just help me understand how you think of things. Because asking questions is how it's really the superpower for how to help people to reality test. I'll also add that I did a TEDx talk, How Can I Know If I've Been Brainwashed? And you can come to my freedomofmind.com site. I think it's under press. I have a link directly to my TEDx talks that are still on. Jay, doesn't it also boil down to critical thinking skills? I really do believe some people lack critical thinking skills. So I hear a lot about critical thinking, and I don't like the term, actually. I've been using more common sense or how to think clearly, or how to evaluate truth claims, as opposed to critical thinking skills. And for me, I always take the position, I want to learn. If you have facts and you can persuade me to change my mind, I'm there. I'm happy to change my mind on any topic, but it has to be based on evidence. And that's the beauty of the scientific method. Louisa, how do we participate in your survey to share experiences in cults? Please subscribe to my newsletter. It's free, and you will be on the first block of people. We're going to, roll it out, beta test it, get feedback from folks. We're making it, look nice. So just be in touch with us. We're hoping to put it out in the next couple of weeks. Is there a name for the 40 questions point survey? Yeah, it's the BITE model. We have a website URL, bitemodel.com, but it's not quite ready for prime time in its full glory. But stay tuned. And my dissertation is up on my website. My dissertation is up in Spanish on my website, as well as the Influence Continuum graphic, and BITE model is in Spanish. I'm looking for a Spanish publisher, if anybody knows of one, because I'd like to get my material out in other languages. Well, it's 4:00, and I want to thank all of my listeners, and thank you for encouraging me to do this live stream. I have so much more I can share and want to share, but I want to encourage people. We're in this together, and there is hope, and we need to lift each other up. Okay? Take care and sleep well at night. Bye.